The moment Avenue walked into the wedding, the entire hall went silent. Not because she was invited, but because she wasn't supposed to be there. And definitely not with him. Daniel. The most dangerous man in New York, United States. The kind of man people lowered their voices just to mention. And tonight, he was walking beside the woman her ex-fiancé destroyed. Ryan saw her first. He froze mid-laugh, glass halfway to his lips, as if reality had just bent in front of him. Because the woman he publicly humiliated, the woman he discarded like she meant nothing, was now standing in front of him like she belonged to another world entirely. And worse, she wasn't alone. Only hours earlier, Avenue had walked into a place she should have never entered. A hidden lounge deep in New York called Eclipse. A place where powerful men made decisions that never reached daylight. She wasn't looking for trouble. She was looking for revenge. And that's where she found Daniel. He didn't even look at her at first. Just a man sitting in silence, like the world didn't have permission to disturb him. But when she finally spoke, everything shifted. "I need you to come to my ex's wedding with me," she said. A pause. Then Daniel finally looked at her. Not impressed. Not surprised. Just calculating. "You want me," he said slowly, "to stand beside you, for revenge?" Avenue didn't blink. "I want him to regret I ever existed." That was the first honest thing she had said in months. And Daniel heard it. Clearly. Most men would have laughed her out of the room. Some would have used her desperation. But Daniel didn't do either. He stood up. Walked closer. Close enough that most people would have stepped back. Avenue didn't move. That alone interested him. "You don't survive men like your ex," Daniel said quietly. "You erase them from your life completely." Avenue swallowed. "Then help me do it." A long silence followed. Then Daniel said the words that changed everything. 2 weeks. Avenue frowned slightly. 2 weeks for what? Daniel turned away. "To remake you." And that was how it started. Not as protection. Not as kindness. But as a transformation. For 2 weeks, Daniel stripped her of everything her past had taught her. How she walked. How she spoke. How she entered a room. How she survived judgment. Every mistake was corrected. Every weakness exposed. Until Avenue stopped feeling like the woman Ryan destroyed. And started becoming something else entirely. Something dangerous. Something untouchable. But nothing prepared her for the wedding. Because the moment she stepped out of the car beside Daniel, the entire world shifted. Whispers spread instantly. The same people who once pitied her were now confused. Because Avenue wasn't just back. She was upgraded. And the man beside her wasn't just protection. He was a warning. Ryan tried to smile when he approached her. But it didn't reach his eyes. "Avenue," he said carefully, "I didn't expect you to actually show up." Avenue looked at him like he was a stranger from another life. "I wouldn't miss this," she said calmly. Not angry. Not emotional. Just finished. Then Daniel spoke. And the air changed. "Congratulations," he said to Ryan. Simple words. But the weight behind them crushed the confidence in the room. Ryan forced a laugh. "Didn't think you two knew each other." Daniel tilted his head slightly. "We don't," he said. A pause. "Yet." That single word changed everything. Because Ryan suddenly realized something horrifying. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't a rebound. This wasn't even revenge anymore. This was something he had no control over. And as Avenue stood between her past and her new reality, she finally understood the truth. She didn't come here to watch Ryan's wedding. She came here to end the version of herself he created. And Daniel was only the beginning of what she was becoming. The morning after the deal, Avenue arrived at Daniel's private estate in New York, United States. No staff. No announcements. Just the quiet of an empty property and a man who seemed to own every shadow in the room. Daniel didn't greet her. He didn't smile. He simply stood, waiting. "You're late," he said. "I'm not," Avenue replied, tension rising in her chest. He tilted his head slightly, the faintest hint of curiosity in his eyes. "Good," he said. "Then you're learning already." And that was how it began. The first lesson wasn't about clothes, or makeup, or even how to act at the wedding. It was about presence. Daniel led her into a long hall lined with mirrors. Every step, every breath, every glance was observed. "You don't walk into a room hoping to be accepted," he said. "You walk in like you own it." Avenue felt ridiculous at first. Her shoulders slumped. Her chin dropped. She flinched at her own reflection. Daniel corrected her posture with precise, unflinching patience. "Again," he said. She walked. He watched. She faltered. He corrected. By the third repetition, she realized something important: fear was no longer her enemy. Her old self, the one Ryan humiliated, was the enemy. The next days were relentless. Daniel pushed her through simulated social events, rehearsed introductions, and high-pressure conversations. "Say something interesting," he commanded. "I don't know what to say," Avenue admitted. "Exactly," he replied. "You don't wait for permission. You control silence before you control conversation." The correction stung, but slowly, Avenue began to understand. Confidence wasn't born. It was forged. Night after night, Daniel's methods were harsh, precise, and sometimes terrifying. He didn't offer comfort. He didn't give praise. He only gave results. One evening, Avenue asked, voice trembling slightly, "Why me?" Daniel didn't look at her immediately. He scanned a set of papers on a nearby desk, then finally said, "You're not special. But you're not weak. That's rare enough." His words didn't soothe her. They ignited something. A quiet fire of determination. By the fifth day, Daniel moved the lessons beyond posture and conversation. He brought her to a room filled with dresses, shoes, and jewelry. "Pick one," he instructed. "For the wedding?" Avenue asked, surprised. "Yes," Daniel replied, flatly. "The one where you will walk into the room like a storm. Not like a guest. Not like a victim. Like a force." She tried on multiple outfits, each one feeling foreign, each one reshaping her image of herself. When she emerged in a deep black dress, Daniel finally spoke. "That one," he said quietly. No explanation. No hesitation. Just command. And Avenue felt it. The first time in weeks she sensed control, not submission. Throughout the 2 weeks, Daniel also taught her survival skills. How to defend herself. How to move with awareness. How to read intent in a room. Every lesson had a hidden purpose: to make her capable. To make her dangerous. To make her untouchable. Slowly, Avenue stopped flinching at Daniel's commands. She no longer felt small in his presence. She began matching his intensity in subtle ways. By the 10th day, Daniel observed her silently, standing behind her as she walked across the estate's open courtyard. "You're ready," he finally said. Avenue looked at her reflection in the glass. The woman staring back was unrecognizable. Not because of beauty, but because of strength. She wasn't the same woman Ryan discarded. She wasn't even the same woman who begged Daniel for help 2 weeks ago. She was new. And she understood, fully, that this transformation wasn't just for the wedding. It was for her. It was for survival. It was for revenge. Daniel finally spoke again. His voice low, controlled, but carrying weight. What happens after the wedding depends on you. Meaning? Avenue asked. Meaning, he said, this world you stepped into, it doesn't forgive weakness. And it doesn't forget courage. Choose wisely. She didn't answer. Not yet. Because she already knew she had chosen. And once someone like Daniel reshapes you, you never return to who you were before. The sun set over New York as Avenue left the estate with Daniel beside her. The streets were quiet. The city oblivious to the storm about to enter one of its most elite venues. But inside her, a storm had already begun. And when she stepped into Ryan's wedding, nothing would ever be the same again. The moment Avenue and Daniel arrived at the wedding, the atmosphere changed instantly. It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. But every person inside that estate in New York, United States, felt it. Something had entered the room that didn't belong to their world. And yet, it controlled it. Ryan noticed her first. He was mid-conversation, laughing lightly with guests, pretending to be in control of his perfect day. Then his eyes shifted. And everything in him stopped. Avenue was standing at the entrance. Not alone. Beside her was Daniel. And that changed everything. Ryan's smile slowly faded. At first, he thought it was a mistake. Maybe a coincidence. Maybe someone who just looked like her. But then Avenue stepped forward. Confident. Composed. Unrecognizable. Not the woman he discarded. Not the woman he humiliated. Something entirely different. A quiet murmur spread through the room. Guests began to notice. Whispers formed like cracks spreading through glass. She came. With him? That's Daniel. And suddenly, curiosity turned into tension. Because Daniel wasn't just a man. He was a reputation no one challenged twice. Ryan forced himself to move forward, trying to regain control of the moment. Avenue, he said carefully, wearing a fake smile, I didn't expect to see you here. Avenue looked at him calmly. No anger. No shaking voice. Just silence before impact. I didn't come for you, she said. That single sentence hit harder than any insult. Ryan's expression tightened. He turned his attention to Daniel, trying to assert dominance through conversation. And you are? He asked cautiously. Daniel finally spoke. Calm. Controlled. Dangerously quiet. I'm the reason she's no longer yours to worry about. The air dropped instantly. No one laughed. No one moved. Even the music in the background felt distant. Ryan's confidence cracked for the first time. Because this wasn't just emotional anymore. This was territory shift. And he could feel it. Avenue stood beside Daniel, watching everything unfold. For the first time, she wasn't the subject of pity. She wasn't the afterthought. She was the center of attention. Not because of Ryan. But because of who stood next to her. The wedding continued, but nothing about it felt normal anymore. Every guest glance carried confusion. Every whisper carried tension. Even the bride began to sense something was wrong. Because Avenue wasn't reacting like a wounded ex. She was reacting like someone who had already moved on from that entire world. Then Daniel's presence shifted slightly. Subtle. But noticeable to anyone paying attention. His eyes scanned the environment differently now. Not as a guest. As a threat detector. Avenue noticed immediately. What is it? She asked quietly. Daniel didn't look at her. We're not alone, he said. Outside the estate, movement had already begun. Unseen vehicles. Silent coordination. Eyes watching from a distance. Something bigger than a wedding was forming outside those walls. Something dangerous. Something organized. A name started circulating through Daniel's network. Marco Sullivan. A rival who didn't respect boundaries. A man who didn't wait for permission. And someone who had just noticed Avenue. Inside the wedding hall, Ryan tried again to recover control, continuing speeches and forced celebrations. But everything felt weaker now. His voice. His presence. Even his status. Because power had already shifted. And everyone could feel it. Daniel leaned slightly toward Avenue. His voice was low. Controlled. But firm. Stay close, he said. Avenue frowned slightly. Why? Because, Daniel replied, this stopped being about your ex the moment I stepped into your life. A pause. Then he added. And someone else just realized that too. A distant sound echoed outside the estate. Not loud enough for panic. But enough for alertness. Daniel's men reacted instantly without explanation. Guests began noticing movement. Confusion spread again. And Ryan finally felt it clearly. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Avenue turned slightly toward Daniel. This isn't just a wedding anymore, is it? She asked quietly. Daniel met her eyes for a brief moment. No, he said. This is where your old life ends, whether you're ready or not. And at that exact moment, outside the estate gates, a black vehicle slowed down. No urgency. No mistake. Just observation. Inside it, unseen eyes locked onto the building. And onto her. Ave. Daniel noticed it too. His expression didn't change. But the energy around him sharpened instantly. This is the part one didn't tell you about, he said quietly. What part? Avenue asked. The part where walking beside me makes you visible to people who don't forgive easily. A pause. Then. Especially people like Marco Sullivan. Avenue didn't respond immediately. Because for the first time, she understood something clearly. This was no longer about humiliation. Not about Ryan. Not even about revenge. This was about entering a world where survival had rules she hadn't learned yet. And Daniel was the only reason she was still standing in it. The wedding behind them continued. Music played. Guests smiled. But everything was fake now. Because outside the walls, something real had already begun. The moment the black vehicle stopped outside the estate, everything inside shifted without warning. No alarms sounded. No one announced danger. But the air itself changed. Daniel felt it first. Then his men. Then, slowly. Ave. Inside the wedding hall, guests were still pretending everything was normal. Glasses clinked. Music played softly. Fake laughter filled the space like decoration. But Daniel wasn't looking at the wedding anymore. He was looking beyond it. Through it. Like he could see something others couldn't. Avenue stepped slightly closer to him. What's happening now? She asked quietly. Daniel didn't answer immediately. His eyes stayed fixed toward the entrance. Then he said, "They're here." Ryan, still trying to recover his dignity, noticed the shift in Daniel's attention. He followed his gaze. Nothing looked wrong. At first. Then he saw it too. The staff at the entrance weren't moving normally anymore. They were frozen. Afraid. A slow knock came at the main gate. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just controlled. Intentional. Like whoever was outside already owned the space and was simply waiting for permission to enter. Daniel's voice dropped. Stay behind me. Avenue frowned. I'm not leaving your side. A pause. Then Daniel looked at her briefly. That's exactly the problem. Before she could respond, the doors opened. And the atmosphere collapsed instantly. A group of men entered. Black suits. No smiles. No greetings. Just presence. The kind of presence that didn't need permission. At the center stood a man who didn't move like a guest. He moved like authority. Marco Sullivan. The wedding guests finally realized something was wrong. Whispers stopped completely. Even the music felt too loud now. Too exposed. Ryan's confidence broke again. Because he recognized Marco immediately. Not as a friend. Not as a guest. But as someone from a world where people like Ryan didn't survive conversations. Marco's eyes scanned the room slowly. Then stopped. On Avenue. A small pause. A faint smile. Not warm. Not kind. Interested. Daniel stepped forward slightly, blocking the line of sight. Marco, he said calmly. Marco tilted his head. Daniel. A long silence followed. Not awkward. Strategic. Like two forces measuring distance before impact. Ryan tried to speak. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Marco didn't even look at him. One of his men simply raised a hand. Ryan stopped talking immediately. Like the words were pulled out of him. Avenue watched everything carefully now. She wasn't confused anymore. She was understanding something dangerous. These men weren't arguing. They were positioning. Like war had already been decided somewhere else. Marco finally spoke again. I didn't expect to find you here, Daniel. Daniel replied calmly. I didn't expect you to be bold enough to show up here. Marco smiled slightly. That's the difference between us. A pause. I don't wait for invitations. The tension tightened instantly. Every guest felt it now. This was no longer a wedding interruption. This was a power collision. Avenue whispered to Daniel. Why is he looking at me like that? Daniel didn't look away from Marco. Because you're the reason he came. That statement hit her harder than anything else. She turned slightly toward Daniel. What does that mean? But Daniel didn't answer immediately. Because Marco spoke again. And this time, his voice carried across the entire hall. I heard you took something that doesn't belong to you, Marco said. His eyes stayed locked on Avenue. And I came to confirm it. Silence swallowed the room. Ryan looked between them, confused, realizing he was no longer part of the conversation at all. He had become irrelevant in his own wedding. Daniel finally stepped forward. And if you're wrong, he asked. Marco's smile faded slightly. Then I leave. A pause. But if I'm right? He looked at Avenue again. Then she comes with me. The room froze completely. Even the air stopped moving. Avenue felt it in her chest. Something about that sentence didn't feel like a request. It felt like a claim. Daniel's voice dropped lower than before. She's not part of your world anymore. Marco nodded slowly. That's what makes this interesting. Outside, more vehicles arrived. Silent reinforcement. The estate was no longer just surrounded. It was being mapped. Controlled. Contained. Avenue realized something terrifying. This wasn't a confrontation that started today. It had already started long before she ever met Daniel. She was just catching up to it now. Daniel turned slightly toward her. His voice softened just enough for her to hear. Whatever happens next, don't panic. She looked at him. That's not reassuring. He replied. It's not supposed to be. Marco stepped forward one more step. The distance between him and Daniel disappeared slightly. Let's stop pretending, Marco said. You didn't just protect her. You marked her. A pause. Then he added. And now every system I know is going to want to know why. Daniel didn't respond immediately. But his eyes darkened slightly. Because Marco wasn't lying. And that was the real problem. Avenue stood between two worlds now. Behind her, a broken past. Beside her, a dangerous present. Ahead of her, a future she didn't understand. And for the first time, she realized she wasn't being saved. She was being pulled into something she couldn't walk away from anymore. Daniel finally spoke. Then let them come. Marco smiled. That's what I was hoping you'd say. And at that exact moment, every exit of the estate quietly locked down. Not loudly. Not visibly. But completely. The wedding was over. The celebration was gone. And what remained? Was something closer to a beginning of war?